welcome back, everyone, to our range tier list aggregate for Dead Cells. If you missed the video we did for the melee rankings, I'll have it in the description. But essentially the idea behind this video is that I and in the last one it was 10 other people, and this one it's 11 other people. I managed to get another person. I actually got like 30 people asking me, but I didn't want to edit all that and aggregate all of that. But basically we all made a 1 through 10 scale and tier list for all of the ranged weapons in Dead Cells. This was done partially as inspiration from the way AzumarillFairy, whose link as well as everyone else I talked to, their important links will be down below in the description for the channels, their Twitch channels, their YouTube channels, their lists in some cases. But basically I aggregate all the lists together and made a scale and tier list on a scale of 12 to 120 because it's all on a 1 to 10 scale. But important notes on this list is a couple of the lists were made during 1.9, which means that the barrel launcher was not introduced and the explosive crossbow had not gotten its 2.0 buff yet. It didn't make that much of a difference, really, because what I did was, for those ones, as well as any other ones, people felt like they couldn't rank properly because they just hadn't used it enough. What I did for those was I gave them an unranked mean score. So after all of it, I took, let's just say the beginner's bow, which mostly got 1s out of 10s. I took all those numbers, added them into a mean calculator, and then took whatever the mean of that was. Let's say it's a 3, and I plugged that in for that score. And then I also rounded down on all of those, as well as on AzumarillFairy. His tier list was, he did some like 7.5 scores. I rounded everything down. You don't get the benefit of the doubt, even if you're a 7.5 or your mean score is a 3.9. One of the items was 3.9 for its mean score. I guess I spoiled that, but yeah, for example. Anyways, we will jump into the list now with AzumarillFairy, the inspiration of it. So let's just hop into that list. So, starting off, like I said, AzumarillFairy was a big inspiration behind how this video series started, and we're starting off with his list. And a couple really interesting things about his list, just right from the get-go, is that, one, as I said before, his was done 1.9, so the explosive crossbow and the barrel launcher probably lower / unranked than they would be if he played them now, but obviously I can't speak for that. Maybe he hates the new explosive crossbow. That's why you should check out his channel below. He's a very good Dead Cells creator. Yeah, a couple of interesting things is that he has the most 10 out of 10 rankings of any list on this, with 7 10 rankings. On top of that, he had the tied highest lightning bolt rating out of 10 out of 10, as well as the highest quick bow and multi-knock bow rating out of 10 out of 10. Other notable things is that he is insane and hates the ice bow, given a 1 out of 10. Y'all know I love the ice bow. He's nuts. And anyone who puts the ice bow lower than what I put it when I get to that list, ignore them, they're all crazy. But no, he said that he actually did a full explanation of all of the items, but he said that he would like it a lot more if it just had a pierce affix on it. But yeah, other than that, pretty standard stuff that we'll be seeing throughout the list. A couple of things that are pretty interesting. He also scored Bone Endless Quiver very high, and we're not going to see that for a lot of lists, so for you Endless Quiver fans, here's your one chance. But yeah, obviously, Alchemic Carbine, incredible weapon. Electric Whip, Hakuto, very incredible weapons. Ice Shards, Throwing Knife, Isle of Infantry Bow, but yeah, really solid list overall, and I really like it. If I had to say like anything that I'm so on, it'd honestly be the ice bow, for sure. But yeah, awesome list. Next list we'll be looking at is Milo, an incredibly good player who is very active in the Dead Cells Discord, which has a lot of great information if you're ever trying to improve. A lot of great players always helping each other out. But on to Milo's list, if you don't remember from last time, he is a very heavy shield player, which really affected his ranking of tick scythes in the last list, but he tried to make sure to leave that bias out and actually claimed that since then he'd been playing a lot more non-shield tactics in particular to get a hang of the style of double weapon playing. And, you know, you can kind of see that in the influence already with Repeater Crossbow getting a pretty high score of 7 out of 10. And then other than that, even with that, you know, Explosive Crossbow got 5 out of 10, and Heavy Crossbow and Ice Crossbow scored pretty low. As we all know, Heavy Crossbow is really good in biomes, but just atrocious in bosses. And Ice Crossbow kind of the same, but even worse than Heavy Crossbow. But, yeah, important little notes. In general, Milo thinks that if you're scored in the double S category, you're kind of an instant win, which I kind of totally agree with how it is laid out here with the E-Whip and Alchemic Carbine. Those two can just be like kind of an instant win. Not necessarily that's where they'll be on my list, but I totally understand the idea of, hey, I have an Alchemic Carbine, I just win. Other little, you know, important notes, had the tied lowest rating for War Javelin at 2 out of 10. And the tied highest rating of Hemorrhage as an 8 out of 10. But it got a couple of 8 out of 10s. It wasn't like that was everyone hated on Hemorrhage and that was the only 8 out of 10. It got like 3 or 4, I want to say. But yeah, pretty cool list. What I do like about it is Fire Blast and Lightning Bolt being so high. It shows a lot of faith in that playstyle. And that's probably, I'd like to say, probably in part of the shield playstyle that Milo tends to go with, because you have those to help you when you're coming off cooldown with those holding in place. Other than that, Blowgun got scored pretty high. You know, I'm the resident Blowgun hater, but yeah, Blowgun pretty good in his opinion. You know, start in the middle. Marksman Bow, I totally get that ranking. It kills biomes and kills a couple of bosses super well, but Hand of the Keen, it's just useless. But yeah, overall, I like Milo's list a lot. Gave Magic Missile a 2 out of 10. I totally understand that. That weapon can just be so frustrating sometimes. But yeah, that was Milo's list. Our next list comes courtesy of Vordee, another Dead Cells content creator, mostly on Twitch, but also has some YouTube stuff. I'll make sure to link both below, obviously. But this is a great example of me wanting to include lists that I don't like or agree with, because I don't like a lot of Vordee's lists, really, but I still include it because, you know, I want to show everyone's different opinions on a lot of different items. So what don't I like about this list, and notable things on it? The main takeaway for me is the Repeater Crossbow being a 3 out of 10, and the Beginner's Bow being above the Repeater Crossbow. I think that's absolutely insane, and, you know, I should clarify why Beginner's Bow is rated as a 4 out of 10, because Vordee noted its free rerolls and its strength as an early game weapon. Sure, I get that. I get putting that at 4 out of 10 for its strength through like the first 2.5 biomes. But even still, I don't see how. And he did say why he doesn't like the Repeater Crossbow, because I asked, and he's like, I just don't like two-handed crossbows at all. They take away a lot of freedom, even if the second attack enables synergy. Again, I get that. I don't know if he just hasn't played it with Wolf Trap, though. Like, I get that it's not a very creative item that you can play around with, but neither is something like Barrel Launcher. Barrel Launcher is a weapon that's just basically a very slow shot that does a lot of damage, and obviously he didn't rate it very high either, but I don't know. I just cannot see a world in which Repeater is a 3 out of 10. It destroys every enemy in the game so easily. But other than that, you know, there are some obvious good standouts here. Hakuto and Carbine getting rated so high. Frost Blast, I don't know what is going on through his head. They're saying it's a 10 out of 10. It's a good item for sure. And it has that build with ice shards that it's like stupid busted. I totally get that. But that's not Frost Blast being busted. That's ice shards being busted. Other notable standouts, Magic Missiles getting a 7, I guess. And then Blowgun and Ice Crossbow still scoring super low. Fire Blast and Lightning Bolt still kind of being a little all over the place in that middle to upper middle section. And yeah, other than that, you know, it's fairly standard. Electric Whip is high. Quick Bow, Multi-Knocks are still getting those high scores. This is the highest score on a Boomerang rating. Had a 9 out of 10. And I don't know. I kind of get it, kind of don't. Like, Boomerang has a lot of competition between Throwing Knife, Firebrands, Boy's Axe, and Ice Shards. And I wouldn't put it above probably any of them. Only in specific cases. Like, I think it's more situational than all 4 of them. But, yeah. Other than that, you know, Bow and Endless Quiver also got a 5, which is kind of on the high side for it. But, yeah, that's Vordee's list. A lot of things I am iffy on, but a lot of things I do like. I do like the Carbine, I do like the Hakuto, the Infantry Bow, the Ice Shards, obviously. So, you know, I did want to include these lists that I disagree with a lot of things on it still. That way I can, you know, show that even 5 BC players, where we're getting, this guy's beating the game with solo War Javelin, literally just War Javelin, and, you know, I wanted to show, like, how different players look at different items in unique and interesting ways. So yeah, that was Vordee's list. Our next list comes courtesy of chipperguy, one of the wiki editors, as I had noted in the last video. And chipperguy's list is kind of interesting, but also kind of boring. But I do like it. Chipperguy, as noted in the last video, is primarily a survival player, but there's not a lot of huge standouts in this list. If I had to say anything that is, like, notable about the list, it's probably Throwing Knife and being rated kind of low, and Barrel Launcher being rated high, but we're going to see a lot of high Barrel Launcher ratings. And really, outside of that, we're going to see that this list kind of lines up with a lot of general opinions on the list. Not all of them. Like I said, Throwing Knife is pretty low. Boy's Axe is about where you'd expect it, but on the lower end of where you'd expect it. Bow and Endless Quiver, again, a 1 out of 10, again. Ice Crossbow, Blowgun, obviously, again, rated pretty poorly by a lot of different people. I will say, I was kind of expecting chipperguy to give Ice Bow like a 2 or a 3 or maybe even a 1, because I've gotten in a lot of disagreements with them about Ice Bow, and anytime I post anything about Ice Bow in the Dead Cells Discord, immediately it will respond with "you Ice Bow," and I was expecting it to get rated really low, and got a 5 out of 10, so you know. But yeah, it's a cool list. Like I said, there's nothing real big, not a lot of big standouts. If I had to say, like I said, if I had to say anything, it'd probably be Throwing Knife. Marksman Bow is pretty high on the list. I consider Marksman Bow kind of inconsistent and not great, but it obviously is really good in biomes and a couple of bosses as well. So, you know, I can't even really judge it too much. It's just so bad against Hand of the King. But yeah, that's chipperguy's list. Like I said, not super crazy in any spots, really. Kind of just a solid list, honestly. So yeah, finally, kind of just a normal, simple list. Our next list comes courtesy of Evian, one of the best speedrunners in all of Dead Cells. It's held a lot of world records. As of recording, I'm not 100% sure what world records they do and don't have, but I'll make sure to link some of their content below, as with everyone else. But yeah, Evian's list, pretty cool. I like a lot of it. I think the really two interesting and weird takeaways for, actually 3 weird and interesting, like, creative takeaways from this is, 1, War Javelin getting a 2 out of 10. I was not expecting that. Like, and obviously the speedrunner perspective, it's very different. And Evian even mentioned, hey, I'm not gonna be able to give like a normal gameplay perspective on a lot of these, so it's pretty interesting seeing that War Javelin gets a 2 out of 10, despite I know it being one of the best speedrunner tools in the game. And even then, in normal gameplay, it has some pretty interesting and, you know, powerful setups, especially in like survival, with something like a giant killer helping it clear out biomes. But other than that, we see Ice Crossbow and Heavy Crossbow both getting 9s out of 10s, which is their highest ratings across this entire list setup. And I don't know, maybe I need to go watch some Ice Crossbow gameplay. But, and to be fair, with the Ice Crossbow, I took it into Giant, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to take it into Timekeeper. But even then, I would not rate it anywhere close to a 9 out of 10 personally. So it's pretty crazy to see it getting rated so highly. We also see Blowgun getting an 8 out of 10. Another thing that I wouldn't put anywhere near that. But other than that, it's fairly standard for the most part. Repeater crossbows kind of in the middle area, which we're seeing a lot of variants on repeaters. Some are putting it super high, some are putting it low. Oh, how could I forget? 4 out of 10 on ice shards. I don't know what is going on with... Maybe Evian just doesn't know the power of the ice shards. I'm gonna give Evian the benefit of the doubt and just... They haven't tried out ice shards with like a giant killer or a tonic. But yeah, overall, very, very different list, which I like. I do really enjoy having this variety of lists. Also, we see a bunch of stuff in that... A bunch of like the elemental stuff in that 6 range. Evian does not have their wizard game going, but yeah, really cool. And thanks again, Evian, for helping me out with this. Check out their stuff down below. Up next, we have Leon, who in the last video, if you didn't see, gave Curse Sword a 9 out of 10, which was pretty crazy. I was a little suspect on some of the choices there, but this list I like a lot for the most part. As noted before, Leon is an Iron Man player and actually did a full Iron Man run that I will have down below with his channel, but prefers more aggressive and fast weapons, which I thought was really odd because we see Lightning Bolt get a 10 out of 10, and that's one of those weapons that you just literally hold in place, and I thought it was really kind of bizarre to see Lightning Bolt and Fire Blast score super high when I know that he prefers these really fast and aggressive builds. Other than that, we also see Infantry Bow getting its first 10 out of 10, and only 10 out of 10, I believe. And also the highest explosive crossbow rating that we'll see with a 9 out of 10. And the lowest heavy crossbow rating. Obviously, heavy crossbow is kind of a polarizing weapon. And with him in particular, I know that when we both first discovered that damage cap issue that it has on bosses, we were super negative on it. We were calling it the worst weapon in the game. I've come up a bit on it, but obviously he hasn't, and I totally get that. We both despise its damage in boss fights. It really needs a buff to that damage cap. But besides that, we do see, kind of standard stuff. Hakuto, Carbine, Throwing Knife, Ice Shards, extra Quick Ball scoring super high. Pyrotechnics kind of being this underrated, hidden, high score across it, and actually we see a pretty low score for Multi-Nox Bow. Not the lowest it's gotten, but for the most part it's been scoring in that 7 to 9 range, and this is a 5 obviously. But for the most part I do like this list. I like it a lot more than his melee one with the Curse Sword getting a 9 out of 10. But yeah, that's Leon's list, and pretty solid. We got another Iron Man player for the next list, Mighty Meme King, who was in the first video with another stupid Curse Sword rating, but very, very good player still regardless, and very active, especially in the Dead Cells subreddit. Helps out a lot with that, and actually gave me a big write-up this time for a lot of their thoughts, so I'm just gonna read that kind of verbatim, and then we'll kind of give an analysis of the rest of the list. So, quote, I didn't rank the beginner's bow as F because I'm ranking these weapons based on their abilities compared to each other, and the beginner's bow works well as a bow in the early game. It's not 100% useless, and its damage potential isn't incredibly far below other weapons, as was the case with Rusty Sword in the melee tier list. It's still pretty far down there though, and I wouldn't go out of my way to use it. Speaking of comparing weapons to each other, I put the quick bow where I did because I can't crit until I've already shot an enemy multiple times, where with other weapons that are ranged, I can kill enemies with less hits than it takes to factor the quick bow crit. And issues like this factor into play into the rankings of other weapons too. For example, the boomerang can only be thrown once before it has to come back, and you're left vulnerable if you don't have good sub-weapons while the boomerang is coming back. Other factors that played into the rankings of other weapons was how limited their usefulness was, depending on current situation, how much effort it takes to deal decent damage compared to other weapons, how far the projectiles travel, damage, rate of fire, ammo capacity, how much auto aim there is, how limited my mobility is when using the weapon, weapons functionality, how effective the damage over time for weapons that rely on dot, and whether or not I can kill a boss with them without a sub-weapon with the arrows stuck in enemies comeback modifier. My conclusion was that most ranged weapons are super useful, especially with certain builds. They're all unique from one another, so very, very few, if any, weapons feel like the same weapon and with a different gimmick, as was the case with several melee weapons. More often than not, I find myself gravitating more towards ranged weapons just because of how unique and useful they are. I forgot how long of a read-up that was. But yeah, thanks for the gigantic explanation, and you can kind of see that like mentality going through the list as you look at, for example, pyrotechnics and magic missile both scored a 10 out of 10, something that I personally would never put for them. But if you kind of look at that mentality of they don't need ammo return, they don't need a lot of synergy to start working, they have a good fire rate, they don't need a sub weapon really besides pyrotechnics, but oil is on everything. But and you can kind of see that with those two especially. And then also with a similar setup with the like 9 range, Multi-Nux really doesn't need ammo return, and it's also ammo return is pretty easy to get, but it really doesn't need much ammo return. It usually kills most enemies and boss transitions before it needs to return some ammo. And then Hakuto is obviously a huge support weapon that kind of, you know, you've seen all of these lists so far. I've been ranking Hakuto very, very high. And then, you know, Ice Shards and Firebrands are just so consistent. Outside of that, I definitely see the reasoning behind Beginner's Bow, again, that 2 out of 10. Oh, also, Boy's Axe and Ice Crossbow weren't ranked. They had told me that they just hadn't played with either since 1.7, so didn't feel like they could give a fair ranking. Totally fine. Like I said, they'll just get a mean averaged out score. And besides that, we see maybe I'm crazy on this repeater crossbow thing. That's what I'm starting to find out, is that maybe I'm just insane and I'm the only person who likes the weapon. No, it's not true. We've had a few high ratings on it. But besides that, we see infantry bow and marksman bow. That's a pretty, you know, fair take on them. Again, I think marksman bow, its struggle in a couple key situations is too hard not to notice, but I definitely see the mentality of putting it as an 8 out of 10, especially because you can just Tesla coil, hand to the king. But yeah, for the most part, I really like it. Like I said, very helpful person in the Dead Cells subreddit. I'll actually link their subreddit profile down below as well, because they've done a lot of stuff to help out newer players and just players in general throughout that subreddit, and done a lot of great things. Like I said, they're an Iron Man player. They've done a lot of very hard challenges. For the most part, I don't know what that blowgun rain is. That's crazy. But for the most part, very, very... And the Sonic Carbine. What is wrong with you? But yeah, very cool list, and thanks again for helping out with this. Once again, VeeDotMe was generous enough to let me use his list in my own video. And again, as noted in the last video, he didn't have time to give a full edited list because he did his own first channel. It was like an hour long after editing. So we had to sort of manipulate the list and use his range system to fix into the range system, and then we scaled it down. So, for example, an A on his list, we just lowered it because an A minus and an A plus was a 7 or an 8, so we went down to 7 with it, and that's how we went through all the stuff with B and C as well. But for the most part, V's list I really, really love, and I totally understand. And like I said, he has this full video of his range tier list, which I'll leave down below, that kind of describes why he picked certain things as he did. But for notable examples, Barrel Launcher was left unranked because this is a 1.9 tier list. But other than that, I really do like a lot of V's list. I totally understand him putting Magic Missile out of 1 out of 10. During this time, I saw, I want to say 4 V streams in like a 5-day period where he tried to win with Magic Missile and just could not get a run going with it at all. And V's a great player, so I totally understand putting it that low. It's such a frustrating weapon sometimes in terms of synergies. This was the only list of the 2 we've seen so far that got a 10 out of 10, with it being the ice shards, and V knows those ice shards. They do everything. They make the game so easy. But other standouts, we see a 7 out of 10 for blowgun. Crazy. Man's insane. Don't listen to that. Just kidding. He likes it. I've seen him do very, very insane stuff. Not since 1.9 with it, personally, but yeah, he likes the weapon and he does very good. Another note is this was prior to Explosive Crossbow's buff, so we can't say for certain how he feels about it now. Unless you go watch V's videos, you should go check him out. If you're somehow not subscribed to him but are subscribed to me, please go subscribe to V. He's like one of the best Dead Cells creators around. Other than that, we see Icebow and Frostblast as a situational. I get that. I don't know if he knew about the heavy crossbow damage cap on bosses at this point when he did this video, because this was pretty early on before a lot of people were pointing it out, but I know he still likes it. I've seen him play with it since then and still likes the weapon pretty decently, so you know, I don't know if he would still put it as an A, but I could see him still putting it as an A. Other than that, we see, you know, Carbine. He's a notable Alchemic Carbine hater, actually. He's always wanted to put it lower than S, but he's always kept it in S because he realizes that it's Alchemic Carbine, and that would be insane to put it low. But yeah, that's V's list. Thanks again, V, for letting me use your stuff. It's helped me out, and V is obviously an incredible player, and you should go check his content out. Up next, we have Ginny IXJ9's list, and if you remember in the last one, she was one of the ones who gave that big write-up, and she once again gave a big write-up for us, so I'm just gonna quote it, and then we'll talk about the list afterwards. So, quote, "With this list, I gave more leniency towards the weapons since range is a lot more reliable, but I've kept my logic of reliability, versatility, and with certain weapons, synergy potential. The weapons in unranked are the ones I've had the least experience with and can't really place into a rank. 2 and 3 are for weapons with the most lackluster damage that makes them too unreliable in an actual run. 4 are for weapons that, although they can work under the right circumstances, are underpowered and outclassed. 5 are for average weapons with slightly difficult crit conditions and alright damage, but nothing too amazing. Heavy crossbow may seem like a controversial placement, but the absolutely horrendous speed and lag and unreliability against bosses makes it a situational weapon. 6 are for weapons with better damage, or in Boomerang's case, works as a semi-good tool. Firebrands and Quickbow are rather mediocre, but can work well in their own ways, so they belong in 7. 8 are for amazing tools and synergizers that can really benefit a build with a good main hand. 9 is my biggest tier, where I put the weapons that work amazingly on their own and can do really well on a run by themselves with no need for synergies. Hokuto is one of, if not the best synergizer and tool to have that will make any build a run winner, and the amazing damage increase that it brings as an offhand. Ice Shards works with all weapons as the best slow tool to not only help kill anything with ease, but also proc several mutations and fixes to further assist any build." Alright. Those big lists are hard to read sometimes. But for the most part, I really like her list, and I totally see where a lot of the theory comes from. I do disagree with Explosive Crossbow. I think it's a really good weapon, but we're seeing a lot of people put it down low, so I must just be crazy and bad. I don't think the heavy crossbow has been controversial at all. Obviously, a couple updates ago, 1.8, it was pretty much universally considered one of, if not the best weapon in the game. Just shredding every enemy in one shot, including bosses, basically. But yeah, it's that horrid damage cap on bosses. It's just so frustrating to work around, especially without a shield now. And then Barrel Launcher, again, another 9 out of 10. Multi-Nox Bow. I'm surprised that Multi-Nox Bow didn't get a 10 out of 10, because she is like notorious for being the Multi-Nox Bow person. She loves that weapon, but I totally see it getting a 9 from her. Alchemic Carbine, is it low? I mean, I think it's low. I think it's very low, personally. But I get what it's saying. They're mainly like the best synergy weapons, so I totally get that. And other than that, for the most part, I like that she didn't include stuff that she wasn't comfortable raiding. I appreciate the Fire Blast, even though Fire Blast is just Lightning Bolt. They're like the exact same weapon, basically, just with very slight. They're like, Fire Blast is basically Frost Blast, and Lightning Bolt is basically Ice Bow, so it's kind of interesting that both those got unranked. Lady's crazy on Infantry Bow. She's notorious Infantry Bow hater, so don't listen to her opinion on that. But yeah, for the most part, I really love this list, and it kind of lines up with a lot with what we've been seeing. Hakuto, Ice Shards, Multi-Nox Bow, Thrown Knife, Barrel Launcher, all scoring very high, Electric Whip, etc., with like Bone Endless Quiver and Sonic Carbine and Ice Crossbow all scoring very low. Next, we have the new person to these lists, Isaac Garza, who I will be linking their channel down below. They are a speedrunner and just player of the game, obviously. And probably the first notable thing to point out in this list is the homunculus rune, obviously, was rated here. Kind of just a little joke. Obviously, you know, we're not including it in the full list. Otherwise, it would have gotten a 3 out of 120, and it would have been ranked as F. And honestly speaking, I think that's way too low of a rating for homunculus rune. I would have put it at like a 7. It has so much utility. I might have put it as like an 8 or 9 even. But obviously we weren't ranking that, but I kind of appreciate putting it in there. But Isaac actually did give a big list of explanation, so I'm just going to kind of go through their explanation on how they went through it, and then we'll get into the list like we have been. Alright, so the way I ranked these items was based on an average between theoretical biome and boss ranking. For example, Hemorrhage I consider to be amazing at bosses, but it lacks a bit on biomes, so I rank it in the middle. I'm also ranking based on optimal use of these weapons, or in other words, if I were to hypothetically task a run with any of these weapons, which would be the best and fastest against the levels worth and enemies and bosses. It's worth mentioning that secondary items are ranked a bit differently, so Ice Shards, Firebrands, Kunai, Boomerang, and I assume Boyzax. For those, I'm paraphrasing on that, but back to the quote. For those, I'm factoring that you do have another item to build to get advantage of their utility, or to cover up major drawbacks. For example, Marksman Bow and War Javelin. Marksman will need another item to fight off close-range enemies, and Javelin will need an item for bosses, but ultimately it didn't affect the ranking much. I also won't consider Hakuto's bow for every item on the list. If it can inflict a dot, just know that adding Hakuto increases the item's rank by like 3 levels. Barrel Launcher is the one item I admit I haven't used much, but since I didn't want to default to an average rank, I decided to put an S just from all the buzz I've heard about it. And the reason that starter bow isn't an F is because I've used it in a ton of fresh file speedruns to perform tricks like Vine Rune Skip or ledge cancels. But also I expect that it'll get a super low rank among the rest of the players, so why not? But yeah, that's Isaac's explanation, and you can kind of see, again, the standout are starting to reappear. Hakuto, Carbine, they are just nuts. Electric Whip, Ice Shards. And then, like he said before, Barrel Launcher he didn't have a bunch of use with it, but we are seeing a lot of people really rank Barrel Launcher high, so, you know, kind of makes sense. Other than that, we see Pyrotechnics still ranking really high, actually. Still, again, pretty consistent 7 to 9 range. Marksman Bow and Infantry Bow, I get that. They both have their own struggles. Boomerang, I'm kind of surprised Boomerang and Boyzax rank so low. Especially Boyzax. I really like Boyzax a lot, but like he said in the list, he kind of had to rank them a bit differently. And I get if you're comparing Boomerang, Boyzax, Firebrands, Throw Knife, and Ice Shards, why would you ever run Boomerang, Boyzax, or Firebrands over Throw Knife or Ice Shards? So I understand that. I do think it's interesting. Also, he had the tied highest rating on Fire Blast at 8 out of 10. Only one other person did that. And I do think it's interesting that Fire Blast and Lightning Bolt both scored really highly, because they're very interesting and very different items from almost everything in the entire game. You have to hold in place and wait for their damage to go off, so it can make them quite a bit of a risk. I guess Sonic Carbine as well, but it's Sonic Carbine. And we see an ice crossbow again, a 7 out of 10. I know Isaac really likes it. Has always recommended me a bunch of different builds that I still do need to experiment more with, especially I think Isaac does it's like a networking with, sorry, a yawn there, a networking with, you shoot it between a bunch of different things and then do the crit, so that might be worth trying out sometime. But overall, you know, like I said, we're seeing a lot of the same repeats pop up, and very strong list. I do really appreciate the homunculus rune, someone just decided, yeah, I'll rank that. He had to add that in. I didn't have that in on the tier maker that I had to, so I do appreciate that. Our next list comes from YeeterStan, someone who is very active in the Dead Cells Discord, always helping out newer players and come up with very unique and creative strategies. The way they went about it was they actually gave a lot of different analysis of specific weapons, so I'm actually just going to go through those and then give my opinion on, you know, how they went about it and if I disagree, agree, etc. So the first one was Repeater. They said ammo is a major problem against bosses since you don't have a shield. But other than that, it's really solid. I kind of agree with that. In particular against Hand of the King, if you don't have a ammo return, that's why I run Powerful Grenade with it a lot, or Root Grenade now. But if you don't have a ammo return, you can absolutely run out of ammo on him, as well as, I guess, probably Timekeeper, but Timekeeper kind of melts. But yeah, I totally agree. I kind of see where that would get an 8 out of 10. Ice Bow and Frost Blast. The reason I put these two together is I think they do the same job, just for different playstyles. Players who are getting kills by enemies one at a time will get more use out of Ice Bow, since it's tailored and interrupting a single enemy, then getting a quick kill. Meanwhile, players who like to clump enemies together, then take them all down, will get a ton of value from Frost Blast, since it's basically just a way to get everything in front of you dead if you set it up right. I agree. I think that they do serve a little bit more purpose than that, and YeeterStan actually was the one who showed me a lot of new tricks with Ice Bow, especially with like networking. YeeterStan was actually who I discovered that networking throwing knife build from. I kind of adapted off of how he does it, because he does it with Wings of the Crow, which is insane. But yeah, I agree with that. I think they do serve a bit more distinctive purposes, but I do see the idea of why you'd rank them right by each other. Hemorrhage. With Corrosive Cloud and some form of crowd control, it's easily an 8 or even a 9. But I feel like Hemo normally is very slow and cautious playstyle, something I feel like most players don't have. Good against bosses, and unlike Repeater, can get arrows back much more easily via shield. I agree. I think Hemorrhage is such a weird weapon, because it's so... the wind up on its attack is so slow, but its breach power and ability to stun enemies is just... and it's just power overall is very good. So it's a very hard to judge weapon, because I think the more you learn, it can fluctuate how you feel about it, either lower or higher. But I think 6 out of 10 is probably a good spot for it. Fire Blast / Lightning Bolt. These both need you to stand still to get one massive spray of damage, which is something that isn't bad, but I also feel it can be a bit awkward at times trying to use. I recommend Fire Blast more, since it can hit multiple enemies at once and has an easy crit condition, but honestly these are both pretty average. I totally understand that 100%. I actually do think Fire Blast is significantly better than Lightning Bolt, because it pierces through enemies immediately, and it has less wind up on its damage. Lightning Bolt takes a second to get its max damage going with crit, and then you have to stop. Obviously you have to stop anyways to roll, but it has less... its damage is more backloaded as compared to Fire Blast, which has a more consistent damage. Blowgun, the ammo's bad, non-crit is worse. Basically just a worse Assassin Dagger. This man understands. This man gets it. Sonic Carbine. I've never wanted to like a terrible weapon so badly, but this weapon is just awful. The base damage is meh, the ammo just isn't enough at all, and the worst part by far is the end lag. Once you're done firing, it takes more than half a second before you can actually move or fire again, so you'll need to get many shots in, since you need to stop firing a full second before an attack actually comes your way. Tapping the fire button, and try tapping the fire button, and you'll see what I mean. Again, 100% agree. Sonic Carbine is awful. Please buff it. Evil Empire. Heavy crossbow, probably the most underrated ranged weapon. It needs good support skills, but even the base damage is enough to get by. Of course, reloading helps, but I found tons of success when I'm just using the main fire for most mobs and occasionally reloading for bigger enemies. Absolutely. Absolutely on the not reloading part. I don't know if I agree on the 6 out of 10 part, but heavy crossbow, you don't need... Reload is almost pointless on it. In like 90% of cases, it's kind of useful in bosses, but yeah, reload is like, it's almost a useless skill. But other than that, didn't give a full explanation on every single item, which I appreciate, honestly, because I didn't want to go through every single item really. But other than that, we see the usual contenders: Ice Shard, Hakuto, Quick Bow, Carbine, Electric Whip, Throwing Knife, Repeater, all scoring high. Multi-Nox scoring pretty high. This is probably one of the lower Pyrotechnics ratings, and also one of the tied lowest with Jenny for Infantry Bow at 3 out of 10, I believe. But yeah, actually I think someone gave Infantry Bow 2 out of 10, but it's showing that, Infantry Bow is kind of all over the place, similar to Broadsword in the last video. All in all, though, I think this is a pretty solid list. We've seen Marksman Bow also kind of all over the list. Kind of funny that those two are kind of, people are split on what's better on them. And the last individual list is mine. Here's my list for the current stuff, and for notable things, really the only notable standout on my list, because I had a lot of tied highest and tied lowest and whatnot, but the only notable thing really is that I am the one of 2 people who put Ice Bow above Frost Blast, that are being Leon. But other than that, like I said, I had Blowgun as a tied lowest, Ice Crossbow as a tied lowest, because those two suck. Sonic Carbine also sucks. All 3 of them are useless. Do not play them. They're trash items. Bone Endless is awful. I hate all of them. I played Bone Endless on stream actually the other day, and it just felt disgustingly bad. Magic Missile was a weird one for me to rate, because it really, really sucks unless you can get a super good set of affixes and built around it, and it's just so much effort to build around that it's not worth it. That's kind of the same with heavy crossbow, is that you can make them work, but and same with marksman bow, is that you can make them work, but it's just really not worth it. War Javelin I put as a 4, and I'm kind of so on that, but the main reason is that its use as a support weapon is outclassed by almost every other support weapon, I feel. But it does have a few uses, especially in survival, where it can clump enemies together, or as we saw earlier, it can be used with marksman bow to help it with bosses and close range enemies. Hemorrhage and Lightning Bolt, they're just inconsistent. They just don't do quick enough damage, I feel, to make them work always, but if you build around them, they work. Like I said, Fire Blast I think is just a better version of Lightning Bolt. Frost Blast I think is very good, but outclassed by the other slow options: Ice Grenade, Ice Armor, Ice Shards, and Ice Bow. I think just do a better job of giving you that slow support and freeze support. But it does have a few builds that's really strong in: Nutcracker, Ice Shards plus Frost Blast, Frost Blast plus Broadsword isn't bad, stuff like that. Nerves of Steel, I think Nerves of Steel is as good as you are. If you're playing really good and can consistently get those crits off through a run and the key spots during elites, during bosses, it's probably closer to an 8 out of 10, but that inconsistency kind of lowered it down for me. Boomerang is a good support item, but mostly outclassed. Ice Bow, I love. I don't listen to anyone else. It's 7 out of 10. It's great. They're all crazy. I'm right. Infantry Bow, I think it works in 2 builds. I haven't tried the other one out, though. The other one is with Tranquility, because it kind of mitigates its bad damage at a distance, and then its close range obviously does really good. But the other one is that Grapple Hook build that, while it takes a bit to build up, the Grapple Hook Infantry Grenade, Infantry Bow Tri-Bind is just so strong that's hard to ignore. Same with Barrel Launcher. It has very good damage, but it really is a very linear build. You get double turrets, you get a dual bind with Ice Shards or Boomerang, and you fired off. I really want it to be survival plus tactics, but we'll see what happens later on. After that, marksman bow and quick bow, very just consistent weapons. They don't do anything super special. They just fire and they work. Same with explosive crossbow. And pyrotechnics is probably the big standout for me. I have been loving this weapon more and more and more lately. I almost put it as a 10, but I think it being tactics only means you have a couple of inconsistencies with it that can sort of slow it down. But yeah, other than that, I think my list kind of lines up with a lot of people, I guess, other than repeater crossbow. I guess I'm the crazy one on that. No, repeater crossbow is great. You're all insane. I'm the right one. But yeah, let's just move on to the final list. And here is the final list. Obviously, the first big standout is Hakuto bow being our first double S. But before we get to that, we're starting from the bottom, which is obviously beginner's bow. It's beginner's bow. Of course, it was going to be the worst scoring item. For this list, I did a 12 to 25 technically, but 0 to 25 score for F tier. Then D was 20 points, C was 20 points, B and A were 10 points, S was 15 points, and double S was 10 points. But outside of that, we see the bottom four are Sonic Carbine at 41 points, I have 120, and everything's at 120 here. Ice Crossbow at 43, Endless at 46, and Blowgun at 52. Everyone, for the most part, Blowgun kinda got a couple of high scores, and so did Endless, but for the most part, everyone kinda agrees that these weapons just suck. They don't serve any purpose, and they're just completely outclassed by other items in almost every single way. After that, we see Magic Missile as the first one in C tier. It's just too inconsistent. It really takes so much build around to work, in most people's opinions at least. A couple people rated it pretty high, but it just takes so much build around and is just not worth the effort. It's basically just worse electric weapon every way. Boomerang and Ice Bow both score 60 out of 120, and they both, they're just support items that are so outclassed by other support items. There's not a lot of reason to run them. I like Ice Bow a lot personally, but they still are both very outclassed by other support items like Hakuto or Ice Shards. Then we have Heavy Crossbow. It just sucks so much in bosses and has a useless second ability for the most part. Marksman Bow got a 70, so War Javelin. Again, these are items that just... War Javelin less so. It serves a purpose of being like a room clear and a good get-off-me tool. But, again, you can just run something like a powerful grenade, a knife dance, ice armor, wave of denial, stuff like that to get enemies away from you. And Marksman Bow, it's just, why would you run it over any of the other bows that are way more consistent and way more powerful? After that, we see Frost Blast, 72 points. Again, kind of outclassed as a support weapon, very situational builds. Makes sense that it would score in this section. And the Explosive Crossbow, I think that's crazy, but what can you do? It got 73, so sorry, Explosive Crossbow. I like you, and a couple of people really like you, but not quite enough. Unfortunate. Firebrands, again, it, for the most part, is outclassed by other things, like all the other offhand stuff, like Throwing Knife and Ice Shards. It does have a few builds in, like, Oil Sword, or just double attack with, like, I like the Pyrotechnics plus Firebrands build. Just all-out fire, and fire is a very powerful synergy. But yeah, makes sense seeing it there. Infantry Bow as well. We saw a couple people really low on it, a couple people really high on it. It was kind of all over the place, so it makes sense that it would land in the middle. Lightning Bolt, Infantry Bow scored 76, as did Firebrands. Lightning Bolt, I was really surprised to see score 79. A lot of people were a lot higher on it than I personally was. But again, it was very similar to Infantry Bow, where it was all over the place and sort of just landed in the middle with a 79. Same with Hemorrhage, kind of all over the place. Actually, no, Hemorrhage was pretty much, everyone was firmly set in the middle on it. It has its uses, but generally there are better things. Fire Blast scored a bit higher than Lightning Bolt, as I personally think it's just a better version of Lightning Bolt. But yeah, 81, really not much to say. They both have that same mechanic of standing in place, and both have their own positives and negatives of that. Then we have Nerves of Steel, again an 82. It really is one of those weapons that if you're good at playing it, it's great to play, and it does insane damage on crits. So it's a B, but if you're good with it, it's like an S, honestly. But if you're bad with it, it's like a D. So I guess, it kind of lands in the middle. Then for both Multinox, Pyrotechnics, and Boyzax, all three of those scored an 85 out of 120. So all three of them were just under being put in A tier. Unfortunate, but, can't play favorites with scoring. We'll see in a second how that works with the S tier as well. But all three of them super good weapons, super powerful, have their uses, have a couple of things they don't work well with. I think it makes sense for them to be in a B tier, but honestly, I would say all three could be an A tier as well, and, sucks that they didn't make it. Barrel Launcher actually got an 87, which, going into this originally, once I started seeing the list, it was obvious that I was going to score really high up there, but going into the list, I did not think Barrel Launcher was going to score that high for everyone. I thought it was kind of, a lot of people would have scored it lower for its inconsistencies, its uses against bosses can be kind of limited, and enemies can knock it back, obviously, but really cool to see people all really like the weapon for the most part. Then we have Repeater Crossbow. They're wrong. No, I'm just joking. Obviously got a bunch of middle in scores and a couple of low scores, so that kept it from hitting S tier, but still a very, very great weapon. Same with Quick Bow. I think Quick Bow's main issue is that it just, it doesn't always work. It's tactics only, so it's a very glass cannon-y weapon. Returning arrows is both a positive and negative because you either run out of ammo or you don't get your crits. So sometimes it kind of struggles to get those kills off, especially in bosses, but very, very good weapon overall. Then in the S tier, we have Throwing Knife at a 99. Everyone kind of agrees Throwing Knife is just a very consistent, powerful weapon. Works on a lot of different builds. Bleed spam is good. Hakuto Throwing Knife is good. Damage over time builds in general are good with it. It's just a very great support item. And then we have the Electric Whip. Everyone agrees this weapon is just great. It just didn't quite score enough to get into the SS tier. Very, very narrow window of what you can get there. It got 108, so, it was close. But then the ones that were really close were Ice Shards and Alchemic Carbine. Ice Shards scored a 109, and Alchemic Carbine scored a 110. So both of those you can kind of say are on the borderline of being SS. I think they both are. They're insane weapons. They just destroy everything, and nothing really can stop them, and they beat the entire game down with ease. And then the only SS tier in both tier lists so far is the Hakuto Bow, and it got insane scores. There was no question that it was going to be the best one overall. Its lowest score was 9. It got 9, 10, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 10. So there was no question that, very early on, it was obvious that this was going to be the highest score. Every single person agrees that this weapon is incredible. It pairs with everything. It makes every build better. Honestly. It can even run it by itself. You can run Hakuto plus a shield, and it works because shields get things like Poison on parry, Burn on parry, plus Blood Shield and Thunder Shield have a dot connected to them. So Hakuto is obvious, the best weapon so far, and I think a couple of items are in contention with it as well. I personally think Alchemic Carbine is, but everyone else agrees that Hakuto is just great. So yeah, that was the list. Thanks again, and please make sure to check out everyone below in the description who helped me out with this. I was super appreciative that they did, and thanks for watching this series. I don't know if I'll do shields or skills because those are such... Shields, there's not really a point in ranking them. Everyone kind of knows what the best shields are. It's Punishment, Rampart, Thunder Shield, Blood Shield, Spike Shield. And just in general, they're very limited and very weird thing to rank. And then with skills, they're so dependent on build. Like, the reality is that most skills you can't rank properly, really. But maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see what happens. But yeah, thanks so much for watching this. Please make sure to check out the stuff below. We got a bunch of different creators like VeeDotMe, Evian, Isaac, Vordee, AzumarillFairy, and more. We got links to some of their videos, like their tier lists, their speedruns, etc. And we have the Discord down below as well if you want to come and hang out and know when I'm posting videos and what's going on with the channel. So thanks for watching, and I will see everyone in the next video.